The smell of vanilla frosting still lingered in the kitchen when I placed the last rainbow candle into my daughter's birthday cake. Emma had been counting down to her 7th birthday for weeks, filling every morning with excited questions about balloons, games, and whether Grandma would remember to bring her favorite strawberry cookies. Watching her twirl around the living room in her new yellow dress, I told myself that no matter how difficult life had become lately, today belonged to her. Our home looked cheerful enough to fool anyone. Bright streamers stretched across the ceiling, colorful paper flowers covered the walls, and tiny gift bags waited neatly on the dining table. Friends would arrive within the hour, followed by family members who always seemed happiest when a celebration gave them something pleasant to post online. I wanted everything to feel perfect because Emma deserved memories untouched by adult problems. My husband, Daniel, stood by the window with his hands buried in his pockets. He hadn't helped decorate. He hadn't even commented on the cake. Every time I looked toward him, he quickly looked away. The silence surrounding him felt heavier than the music softly playing through the speakers. "You okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "I'm fine," he answered without meeting my eyes. It wasn't convincing. For months, little things had changed. Late nights at work became more frequent. Conversations became shorter. Smiles became polite instead of genuine. Whenever I suggested we spend time together, there was always another meeting, another deadline, another excuse. I kept telling myself marriages went through difficult seasons, and that patience was another way of saying love. Emma rushed into the kitchen holding a handmade birthday crown. "Mommy, can you tie it?" I smiled, knelt beside her, and adjusted the ribbon beneath her curls. "There," I whispered. "Now you look like the birthday queen." She wrapped her tiny arms around my neck. "This is the best birthday ever." I hugged her tightly, wishing I could freeze that moment forever. As she skipped back toward the living room, Daniel quietly cleared his throat. "Can we talk?" Something inside me tightened. "Now, it won't take long." I followed him into our bedroom, closing the door behind us. The cheerful sounds from the living room suddenly felt miles away. Without saying a word, he reached into a leather folder and placed several papers on the bed between us. At first, I thought they were insurance documents or school forms. Then I saw the title, Petition for Dissolution of Marriage. For a few seconds, the words refused to make sense. "What is this?" "My lawyer prepared everything." I stared at him, waiting for him to laugh, apologize, or explain that this was some terrible misunderstanding. Instead, he folded his arms. "I think it's better if we end this now. Today?" My voice barely existed. "Of all days? Today?" He sighed as though I had asked an unreasonable question. There never would have been a good day. "Our daughter's birthday isn't just another day. I didn't want to drag this out." Each sentence landed harder than the last. "How long have you been planning this?" "A while, I repeated, feeling the room tilt beneath me. While we were buying birthday decorations? While Emma was making invitations? While I was baking her cake? He looked toward the floor but never answered. That silence told me everything. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the papers back at him. I wanted to ask who he had become. Instead, I heard tiny footsteps running down the hallway. "Mommy," Emma called. "Sophie's here." My heart shattered all over again. Daniel stepped aside and opened the bedroom door as if nothing had happened. "Go," he said quietly. "Seriously? The guests are here." I looked down at the divorce papers, still trembling in my hands before carefully placing them back onto the bed. When I opened the front door, Emma's best friend rushed inside carrying a brightly wrapped present. "Happy birthday!" Everyone cheered. I forced the widest smile I could manage. "Come in," I said. One by one, neighbors, cousins, and family friends filled the house with laughter. Completely unaware that my marriage had ended only minutes earlier, Emma laughed while chasing balloons across the living room. I laughed too, or at least I made the same sound. Inside, every heartbeat felt like it was breaking something I would never be able to repair. Exactly 1 hour after Daniel handed me the divorce papers, my phone vibrated inside my apron pocket. The screen displayed a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. Something told me not to. My fingers hovered over the unfamiliar number for a second before I answered. "Hello? Is this Mrs. Harper?" a calm female voice asked. "Yes, my name is Rebecca Collins. I'm calling from Harrison and Cole Financial Services. I apologize for contacting you during what may be an inconvenient time, but I believe you should be aware that your husband requested changes to several joint investment accounts this morning. Unfortunately, one document still requires your signature, and after reviewing the file, I noticed something that didn't seem consistent with the information we have on record. I frowned. I don't understand. Daniel never mentioned any investments. There was a brief silence. I suspected as much, she replied carefully. For legal reasons, I can't discuss specific details over the phone unless we verify your identity. However, I strongly recommend that you come to our office before signing anything related to your divorce. My stomach tightened. I'll be there. After ending the call, I stood alone in the hallway while children laughed only a few rooms away. Emma was opening presents, proudly showing everyone her new art set. She deserved every smile she wore that afternoon, and I refused to let my heartbreak steal another second of her birthday. I asked my neighbor, Claire, if she could watch the party for half an hour. You don't look well, she whispered. I just need to take care of something. She squeezed my hand without asking questions. Go, we've got this. Driving across town, I replayed every strange moment from the past year. Daniel insisting on handling our taxes alone. His sudden interest in reviewing bank statements after everyone had gone to bed. The unopened envelopes he always tucked into his briefcase before I could sort the mail. I had trusted him completely, because that's what marriage was supposed to be. Rebecca greeted me in a quiet conference room. She slid a folder across the table. Please review these. Inside were copies of account statements I had never seen before. There were investment portfolios, savings accounts, and property documents, totaling far more money than I realized we had accumulated together. I've never seen any of this! I didn't think you had. She pointed to several forms. Over the last 8 months, your husband has been transferring marital assets into accounts that list only his name. Most of the transfers were legal, because they occurred before any divorce filing. But there are questions regarding disclosure requirements. You deserve independent legal advice before signing anything. I felt the room spin. This wasn't a sudden decision. Rebecca shook her head gently. No. The divorce papers hadn't been written in anger. They had been prepared over months. While I baked birthday cakes, while I packed Emma's school lunches, while I believed we were working through a difficult season, he had already been planning his exit. Instead of crying, something inside me became unexpectedly quiet. For the first time that day, my emotions stopped leading me. Locke took over. I won't sign anything. I think that's wise. When I returned home, the party was winding down. Emma ran toward me with frosting on her cheeks. Mommy, look! Grandma said my drawing should go on the refrigerator forever. I smiled and kissed her forehead. It absolutely should. Daniel watched us from across the room. His expression suggested he expected tears, questions, maybe even a public confrontation. I gave him none. That evening, after Emma fell asleep surrounded by birthday balloons and stuffed animals, Daniel placed a pen beside the divorce papers. You can sign whenever you're ready. I looked at the documents, then calmly pushed them back toward him. I'll have my attorney review everything first. For the first time all day, confidence disappeared from his face. What attorney? The one who's going to explain why you spent 8 months hiding our finances. His eyes widened for barely a second before he recovered. I don't know what you're talking about. You will. I picked up the folder Rebecca had given me and walked out of the room without another word. Behind me, the silence felt very different from the one that had followed his announcement earlier. This time it wasn't the silence of someone whose world had fallen apart. It was the silence of someone who had finally realized she wasn't walking through the dark anymore. She had found the light, and now she intended to follow it wherever it led. The next morning I woke before sunrise, not because I had slept well, but because my mind refused to rest. Emma was still asleep, hugging the oversized teddy bear she'd received for her birthday. Looking at her peaceful face reminded me why I couldn't afford to fall apart. Whatever happened between Daniel and me, she deserved at least one parent who made her feel safe. Within 3 days, I hired a family lawyer named Olivia Grant. She was calm, direct, and impossible to intimidate. After reviewing every document Daniel had prepared, she looked up and said, Your husband expected you to sign these without asking questions. I almost did. Fortunately, you didn't, Olivia explained that Daniel had failed to disclose several assets and had attempted to transfer money in ways that could become significant issues during the divorce proceedings. It didn't mean I would automatically win every legal argument, but it meant the process wouldn't be as simple for him as he'd planned. For the first time since my birthday, I felt something unfamiliar. Hope. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted fairness. Daniel moved into a downtown apartment the following week. Emma stood by the window watching his car disappear until it turned the corner. Is Daddy coming back for dinner? I knelt beside her, choosing my words with care. Daddy loves you very much. He just won't be living here anymore. She looked down at her shoes. Did I do something wrong? My heart broke all over again. Oh, sweetheart. I pulled her into my arms. None of this is because of you. Sometimes adults make choices that children don't understand, but you are loved more than anything in this world. She nodded slowly, though I wasn't sure she completely believed me. Children often blamed themselves for storms they never created. The following months became a lesson in stretching every dollar. Legal fees, household bills, and Emma's school expenses forced me to rethink everything. I canceled streaming subscriptions, sold furniture we no longer needed, and learned how many creative meals could come from one grocery trip. Some evenings, after Emma went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by receipts, trying to convince myself that numbers couldn't measure my worth. Then I remembered something my grandmother used to say. Strong roots grow in difficult soil. Maybe this was my difficult soil. Maybe something stronger was quietly growing beneath everything that hurt. One afternoon, Claire knocked on my door carrying 2 cups of coffee. I heard the community center is looking for a program coordinator, she said. I've never managed programs. You've organized every neighborhood fundraiser for the last 5 years. Trust me, you already have. I almost talked myself out of applying. Then I remembered how many times I'd underestimated myself simply because someone else had. 2 weeks later, I walked into my interview wearing the only blazer I still owned. Instead of pretending to be fearless, I answered every question honestly. I spoke about organizing school events, coordinating volunteers, balancing budgets, and solving problems when things didn't go as planned. By the end of the interview, the director smiled. You've been doing this work for years. You just weren't getting paid for it. I laughed for the first time in weeks. 3 days later, they offered me the position. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't a 6-figure salary. But it was enough to pay the bills, enough to rebuild our lives, enough to remind me that I was capable. Emma celebrated by making a handmade certificate that read, "Congratulations, Mommy. Best job ever." I taped it above my desk. Whenever self-doubt crept in, I looked at those uneven letters and remembered who I was working for. As the weeks turned into months, our little house began feeling different, quieter, not lonely, peaceful. We started creating new traditions. Friday movie nights with homemade popcorn. Saturday morning pancakes shaped like animals. Evening walks through the neighborhood where Emma collected colorful leaves and insisted every one of them had its own personality. Slowly, laughter returned. Not the forced laughter I'd worn at her birthday party. Real laughter, the kind that surprised you. The divorce proceedings continued, but they no longer controlled every thought I had. Olivia kept me informed, reminding me to stay patient while the financial investigation unfolded. One afternoon, she called with an update. We've located additional accounts your husband didn't disclose. I closed my eyes. So he really planned all of this? Yes, there was a pause. But planning doesn't guarantee success. When I hung up, I realized something important. Months earlier, that news would have devastated me. Now it simply confirmed what I already knew. Daniel hadn't underestimated my intelligence. He'd underestimated my resilience. Meanwhile, Emma was changing too. One evening, as we planted flowers outside our front porch, she smiled and said, "I like our house." "You do?" She nodded enthusiastically. "It feels happy." I looked around at the tiny garden, the peeling white fence, and the porch swing we'd bought secondhand. It wasn't the biggest house. It wasn't the fanciest. But it was ours. Not because everything had gone according to plan. Because we had built something stronger than appearances. We had built peace. Just when life finally began to feel stable, my phone rang again. This time, caller ID showed a name I hadn't expected to see. Daniel. After months of speaking only through lawyers, he wanted to meet in person. Something in his voice told me this conversation wouldn't be about the divorce. For the first time since he walked away, he sounded like the one who needed answers. For a long moment I stared at Daniel's name glowing across my phone screen. Months ago, I would have answered before the second ring, worried that something might be wrong. Now I simply let it ring once more before pressing the green button. "Hello?" His voice sounded different, quieter, almost uncertain. "Thanks for answering. What do you need, Daniel?" There was a brief pause. I was hoping we could meet. Just talk. "We've been talking through attorneys." "I know. This isn't about the divorce." I glanced toward the backyard where Emma was chasing bubbles with 2 neighborhood children. Her laughter drifted through the open kitchen window, light and carefree in a way I hadn't heard for a long time. "When?" I asked. "Whenever you're comfortable." I chose a small cafe halfway between our homes, a place neither of us had visited before. It felt neutral, untouched by memories. When I walked inside 2 days later, Daniel was already sitting near the window. He looked older than I remembered. The expensive suits had been replaced by a plain sweater, and the confidence that once filled every room seemed to have faded. He stood awkwardly as I approached. "Thanks for coming." I nodded politely and took the seat across from him. Neither of us spoke while the waitress poured coffee. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "You look happy." The observation surprised me. "I've found peace." He lowered his eyes into his cup. "I can see that. For years I had imagined this moment differently. I thought if we ever sat across from each other again, I'd have a list of questions. I'd demand explanations. I'd tell him how deeply he had hurt me. Instead, I felt strangely calm. Healing had quietly replaced anger while I wasn't paying attention. Daniel cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology." I waited. "I handled everything terribly." "Yes, I thought ending things quickly would make it easier." "For who?" He didn't answer. After a moment he admitted, "For me." That honesty, simple as it was, carried more weight than any excuse could have. "I convinced myself you would recover," he continued. "You've always been strong." I gave a small, almost amused smile. "Being strong doesn't mean something doesn't hurt. I know that now." Another silence settled between us, but this one wasn't uncomfortable, it was honest. "I lost my job last month," T said quietly. I looked at him without reacting. "The company restructured. My position was eliminated." "I'm sorry to hear that. I deserved worse." "No," he looked confused. "You deserved the consequences of your choices," I said gently. "Not misery." He blinked as though he hadn't expected kindness. "I also found out." He hesitated. "The relationship I left our marriage for ended a long time ago." There it was, the truth I'd suspected but never needed confirmed. "I see. I thought I was chasing a better life." "And?" He laughed bitterly. "I spent so much time looking for something different that I failed to appreciate what I already had." Years earlier, hearing those words would have felt like victory. Now they simply felt sad. Not because I wanted him back, because regret always arrives too late to rewrite the past. Daniel reached into his jacket and placed a folded envelope on the table. "I've been writing this for weeks." "What is it?" "A letter." I didn't touch it. "You don't have to read it now. I'll decide later." He nodded. "I understand." Our coffee grew cold as the conversation shifted to Emma. We talked about her school projects, her love of painting, and the way she insisted every stray cat deserved a name. For the first time since our separation, we weren't arguing. We were simply two parents trying to do better for the little girl who loved us both. "I've missed a lot," Daniel admitted. "You have. I want to change that." "Then don't tell me." He looked up. "Show her." His eyes filled with quiet emotion. "I will." A week later, Emma had a school art exhibition. Parents lined the hallways admiring colorful paintings and handmade sculptures. Daniel arrived early, not to impress me, not to prove anything, to support his daughter. Emma spotted him almost immediately. "Daddy!" She ran into his arms, laughing as he lifted her off the ground. For a second, I watched them from across the room. Not with resentment, with gratitude. No matter what had happened between us, Emma deserved moments like this. After the exhibition, Daniel approached me. "Thanks for letting me be here. I didn't do it for you." "I know." We exchanged a quiet smile. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no romantic tension. Only mutual respect built from painful lessons. As Emma skipped ahead carrying her painting, she turned around and reached for both our hands. Without thinking, we each took one. The three of us walked together across the school parking lot. Not as husband and wife, but as parents. Sometimes families change shape instead of disappearing. That afternoon, I realized something unexpected. Daniel no longer held the power to define my happiness. His approval wasn't my goal, his regret wasn't my reward. The greatest consequence he never expected wasn't losing the marriage. It was watching the woman he once underestimated build a life so full of peace that she no longer needed him to complete it. As I tucked Emma into bed that evening, she smiled sleepily. "Mom?" "Yes, sweetheart. I think this was the happiest school day ever." I kissed her forehead. "I think so too." After turning off the light, I walked into the hallway carrying the unopened letter Daniel had given me. For the first time, I felt ready to discover whether some chapters truly deserved to be closed, or whether forgiveness could become the final gift we gave ourselves before beginning a completely new story. I didn't open Daniel's letter that night. Instead, I placed it inside my desk drawer and let it stay there for nearly 3 weeks. Not because I was afraid of what it might say, Because I had finally reached a place where I no longer needed someone else's words to explain my own healing. For years, I believed closure came from answers. Now I understood it often came from acceptance. Life settled into a rhythm that felt unfamiliar at first but slowly became comforting. Every weekday morning, Emma and I left the house together. She carried her backpack with the confidence of a child who finally felt secure again, while I carried my coffee and the quiet certainty that we were building something worth protecting. The little program at the community center continued to grow. Families trusted me. Volunteers relied on me. Children greeted me by name whenever I walked through the front doors. One afternoon, my director called me into her office. "I've been reviewing this year's numbers," she said with a smile. My stomach tightened. Whenever a manager wanted to review numbers, it rarely ended with good news. Instead, she slid a folder across her desk. "I'd like you to become our operations manager." I looked at her completely speechless. "Are you serious?" "You've increased volunteer participation, organized 3 successful community events, and built programs that families genuinely love. You've earned this." Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. A year earlier, I had questioned whether I could even support my daughter. Now someone believed I could lead an entire organization. That evening, Emma insisted we celebrate with pizza and chocolate cake. As we sat together in our tiny dining room, she raised her glass of orange juice. "To Mommy!" I laughed and clinked my water glass against hers. To us, because none of this belonged only to me. Every difficult morning, every tear, every impossible decision, we had survived them together. A few weeks later, Daniel asked if he could take Emma to the Science Museum. She came home glowing with excitement. "Daddy helped me build a robot. I'm glad you had fun." He said he's trying to be better. Children noticed effort long before adults noticed perfection. I hoped for Emma's sake that he meant every word. That night, after she fell asleep, I finally opened the letter. It wasn't a request to come back, it wasn't an excuse. It wasn't an attempt to rewrite history. It was simply an apology. Daniel admitted he had spent so much time chasing the life his ex imagined that he failed to appreciate the family he already had. He accepted responsibility for the pain he caused, thanked me for protecting Emma from unnecessary conflict, and promised that whatever happened next, he would spend the rest of his life becoming the father she deserved. When I finished reading, I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into its envelope. Then I placed it inside a memory box, not because I wanted to remember the betrayal, because I wanted to remember the lesson. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't pretending someone hadn't hurt you. It was refusing to let that hurt control the rest of your life. Months passed. The divorce became final. There were no dramatic courtroom speeches, no public confrontations, no moment where everyone applauded because justice had finally arrived. Real life rarely worked that way. Justice arrived quietly. It looked like sleeping peacefully through the night. It looked like laughing without forcing a smile. It looked like paying bills with money I had earned. It looked like watching my daughter run across a playground without wondering whether she could feel my sadness. One Saturday afternoon, Emma and I returned to the same park where we'd celebrated one of her birthdays years before. She raced toward the swings while I sat on a nearby bench. Another mother settled beside me. She watched Emma laughing. "You have a beautiful daughter." "Thank you. She's lucky." I smiled softly. "I think I'm the lucky one." As Emma pumped higher into the air, sunlight caught her hair exactly the way it had on the birthday when my world seemed to end. Only now, I saw that day differently. If Daniel hadn't handed me those divorce papers, I might have spent years fighting for a marriage that only one person wanted to save. I might never have discovered my own strength. I might never have built a career that fulfilled me. I might never have realized that peace is worth more than appearances. The worst day of my life hadn't destroyed my future, it had introduced me to it. Emma ran back toward the bench and slipped her hand into mine. "Mom?" "Yes. Are we okay now?" I looked around at the ordinary afternoon surrounding us. The children laughing, trees moving gently in the breeze, the simple life we'd built one choice at a time. I squeezed her hand. "We're more than okay," she smiled. I thought so. Walking home together, I realized the greatest birthday gift either of us had ever received wasn't wrapped in colorful paper or tied with ribbons. It was the chance to begin again. Sometimes the people who walk away believe they're taking your future with them. They aren't. Sometimes they're simply making room for the life you were always meant to build. If you've ever been abandoned, betrayed, or forced to start over when it felt impossible, remember this: Your hardest chapter does not have to become your final chapter. Healing takes time, courage, and countless small choices, but every step forward matters. One day you'll look back and realize the ending you feared became the beginning you needed. Have you ever experienced a moment that felt like the end of everything but eventually became the start of a better life? I'd love to hear your story in the comments.